Hello my friends and welcome back. I realized that before continuing it would be a good idea to slow down for a bit and explain some important concepts about Kamen Rider so that everybody's on the same page before we continue. Kamen Rider was originally created by Shotaro Ishinomori and its first episode aired on April 3rd, 1971. It followed the story of Takeshi Hongo, as he was kidnapped and transformed into a cyborg by the evil terrorist organization Shocker. However, a rogue scientist freed him before he could be transformed to serve Shocker in their quest for world domination. This led to the birth of Kamen Rider Ichigo. This original series introduced a number of concepts that are used and adapted in almost every season of Kamen Rider. First is the usage of a belt, typically called a driver, to transform into their suit. In order to transform, a rider shouts out Henshin, which means transform in Japanese. Next is the importance that every Kamen Rider has a motorcycle or other vehicle custom built and styled after them. Finally is the primary finishing attack of most Kamen Riders, the Rider Kick, in which a rider jumps high into the sky and then kicks into whoever they're fighting. In the 10th episode of the original show, Ichigo's actor shattered his foot in a motorcycle stunt gone wrong. As such, a new concept was created, the secondary rider. Hayato Ichimonji was introduced as Shocker's next rider, specifically designed to fight against Ichigo. However, Ichigo was able to rescue Ichimonji before he was brainwashed, and Kamen Rider Nigo was born. From 1971 to 1999, we would see 9 main Kamen Riders on TV and 4 more in movies and specials. This is the Showa era of Kamen Rider, starting with 1971's Kamen Rider Original and continuing with Kamen Rider V3, X, Amazon, Stronger, Sky Rider, Super 1, the anniversary special Z-Cross, the final 2 seasons of Kamen Rider with Black and Blackguard X, and the movie trio of Shin, Zetto, and ending in 1994's Kamen Rider J. However, Kamen Rider's hiatus would only last until January 30th, 2000, where Kamen Rider Kuga aired as the first Heisei Kamen Rider. Kuga was distinct in separating itself from the Showa-era Rider's cyborg concept, which was believed to be stale at this point after being overused in the Showa era. Kuga followed Yusuke Godai, a happy-go-lucky man, as he fights off the demonic Grongi, all while trying to figure out where his powers come from and what the Grongi's end goal was. Kuga introduced and modernized a number of ideas of its own, primarily the concept of a rider having multiple forms that all culminated into a final form that surpassed them all. With the success of Kuga came a revitalization of the show, starting with Kamen Rider Agito, and then being followed by Ryuki, Faiz, Blade, Hibiki, Kabuto, Den-O, Kiva, and Decade. This forms the first phase of Heisei Kamen Rider, appropriately named Heisei Phase 1. The Phase 1 shows each have their own unique flares, but on the whole they tended to be more grounded and dramatic first, and having people in costumes punching rubber-suited monsters second. Phase 1 introduced and changed a few concepts as well, including the introduction of a summer movie for each season, starting with Kamen Rider Agito's Project G4. Heisei Phase 1 also reintroduced the idea of evil Kamen Riders, called Dark Riders, which had first been seen with the Shocker Riders in 1971's original Kamen Rider series, but truly became prominent for the show at large here. The final Phase 1 Kamen Rider is Kamen Rider Decade, which follows Tsukasa Kadoya as he travels to alternate versions of the other Phase 1 shows in order to try and save the worlds from being destroyed and to find a world he can call his own. Decade introduced a stronger focus on quote-unquote gimmick items that would need to be inserted into the driver in order to henshin and boost toy sales. After Decade comes what is known as Heisei Phase 2, as it follows Heisei Phase 1. It began with Kamen Rider Double in 2009. Double follows two detectives, Hidari Shotaro and his partner Philip, as they combine into a single rider, Kamen Rider Double, to fight against an organization called Museum and their backer, Foundation X. Double introduced a lot of great things into the franchise, such as exemplifying a two-part format where each story was told across 2 episodes in order to better flesh out ideas and use Monster of the Week suits for more than 1 week and just really delve into the characters better. Double also introduced the idea of a recurring winter crossover movie, starting with Kamen Rider Cross Kamen Rider, Double and Decade, Movie War 2010. It also introduced the idea of V-cinemas, direct-to-video movies usually set after the series that focused on characters aside from the main writers. The last introduction was a recurring villain threat with Foundation X, who would frequently reappear as the antagonist in crossover movies and specials. Heisei Phase 2 would continue with Kamen Rider O's, Fourze, Wizard, Gaim, Drive, Ghost, X-Aid, Build, and lastly, G.O. These seasons introduced a lot more fun and goofy moments to have levity throughout the show, along with bringing people in suits punching rubber-suited monsters back to the forefront, though still having a good amount of plot and drama mixed throughout. The final Phase 2 rider and the final main Heisei rider is Kamen Rider G.O. Another anniversary season, much like Decade, G.O. follows Tokiwa Sogo as he fights corrupted versions of Heisei Kamen Riders throughout time, as he tries to become the nicest king in history instead of the demonic overlord he is destined to become. Before moving on to the current era of Kamen Rider, I feel like it's important to mention the Showa Riders that were featured again in the Heisei era, starting with the reboot and retelling of the 1971 Kamen Rider and its successor Kamen Rider V3 within the movies Kamen Rider the First and Kamen Rider the Next. These 2 movies retell the origin story of Ichigo, Nigo, and V3 and their fight against Shocker. But it's told in a more grounded and dramatic way like the Phase 1 Riders that were airing on TV at the time were doing. The other is the Amazon Prime exclusive Kamen Rider Amazons, spelled with a Z at the end because it's edgy. Or, as it was known here in the West, Amazon Riders, which takes the suit design of Kamen Rider Amazon and tells a dark, edgy, and mature story with it. These 2 both took concepts from the Showa era and attempted to revive them and tell them in new ways in the Heisei era. This all brings us to the current era of the show, the Reiwa era, which began with Kamen Rider 01 and is now in its 2nd season with Kamen Rider Saber. I hope this was helpful in better understanding the wide world of Kamen Rider. Before we go though, I wanted to touch on one final thing. While every season is for the most part standalone, the exceptions being Decade and G.O. as their anniversaries, every season of Kamen Rider boils down to one idea. People being given a power that was meant for evil, but using it to protect others, uphold justice, and be kind. Whether it's the cyborg transformations of the Showa era, the mystical powers of Kuga, the inherited powers of Decade and Geo, or the magic of Wizard, or the hard technology of 01, the message of Kamen Rider is very clear. Thank you so much for watching. Leave all your comments down below and subscribe for more. Take care, my friends.